marine ecosystems in general provide many, many benefits. Now, we're very aware of some of those benefits, and we can put a monetary value on some of those benefits. Say, for instance, the fact that we have sea fish from the sea, and we have raw materials extracted for the sea for purposes of building, etc. Now, historically, what's happened has been a little bit of a fight, I suppose, between those industries which are trying to use marine ecosystems versus those who are trying to conserve marine ecosystems. Now, there's a huge amount of legitimacy in terms of the view of fishermen, people working in oil and gas exploration, etc. But what we're trying to do in terms of the work that in environmental evaluation is to just make sure the balance is correct. What I mean by that is that you have a situation where in some instances, the benefits that have been provided, which are much less tangible than, say, for instance, the fish on your plate or the petrochemicals which have maybe helped get that fish to your plate, some of those benefits are much less tangible and therefore are partly ignored by decision makers. So what we try to do in a discipline called environmental economics, we've been trying to do it for 20, 30 years, is to put a monetary value on a good or service which doesn't inherently have a market value. Now, for instance, we know that it's very beneficial in society for us to try and decrease the potential impacts of climate change. But many of the benefits, say for instance, from marine ecosystems are linked to the benefits in terms of decreasing, mitigating climate change. And yet, if we change our behavior with respect to marine ecosystems, it may well be reducing the amount of mitigations marine ecosystems provide. We also know, for instance, that marine ecosystems provide other types of benefits which are less tangible as well. For instance, cycling nutrients, which are also very beneficial for society. Again, there's no inherent monetary figure for that. So what environmental evaluation is about is just redressing that balance. Sometimes there'll be a situation where it is indeed appropriate to continue on the pathway that we've been on for some time, but in many instances that isn't the case. Now, the study I've been talking about at the conference today is a study for the UK government which attempts just that. There is the establishment of marine protected areas, which under UK law are called marine conservation zones, but basically marine protected areas. And the idea here was this, is that clearly there are stakeholders who are very disenfranchised by an exclusion from a particular zone. So the UK government had to be sure that this kind of endeavour to set up a system of marine protected areas was economically beneficial, was good for society. And so in order to do that, what they did was they conducted one study, this was conducted independently of our own, which looked at the cost. So there was interviewing petrochemicals industry, telecommunication industry, fishing industry, to see what it would imply in terms of these restrictions would imply for them. What we did was to say, well, there are these costs, that's for sure, but let's also take into account the benefits. What we tried to do is apply environmental evaluation to try and assess what are the benefits, say for instance I've mentioned, of climate change mitigation, of nutrient recycling, and other types of ecosystem services as we call them. And what we found is that the benefits are, even at a worst estimate, about 10 times bigger than the costs. And so we have a situation where conservation isn't being carried out just for the sake of protecting species for their own sake, what we as economists call intrinsic value. That is of course very important, but just for the sake of preserving our own welfare for future generations and for our current generation, some of these changes have a very short timeline, it actually is beneficial to, say for instance, set up protected areas or to consider a more integrated approach to managing marine ecosystems.